The United States carried out acts of mass murder against the people of Yemen over these last few days, night after night, raining down fire, death and destruction from shot and shell, from the air and from the sea. Netanyahu has entered what he described, or what was helpfully described for him by what passes for the snake screen media here in Western countries, a pinpoint invasion of Gaza, rather like the limited invasion of Rafah that they promised the hapless and semi-comatose Joe Biden last year. But let's start with Yemen. The Yemeni people are the poorest people in the world, but in fact they are the wealthiest. They are the wealthiest in spirit, in morale, and in integrity. The Yemeni people, way and far away in the Gulf, on the Red Sea, have no need to concern themselves with what's happening in the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian refugee population there, especially when the countries closest to Palestine are arch collaborators, each and every one, including the newest of them, the Al-Qaeda, ISIS-ruled, now not Republic of Syria. When Palestine's neighbours are not only doing nothing, but actively collaborating with the slaughter of their presumed, supposed co-religionists, fellow Arabs, fellow Levantines, you could have forgiven the Yemeni people, who themselves suffered not just poverty, but regime change operation after operation, and a full-scale war, guided, fueled, armed by the most powerful Western countries and carried out by their very own neighbours in the Persian Gulf. You could have forgiven the Yemeni people if they'd said, we'll have to sit this one out. But that's the very last thing that they have done. Alone of all Arab states, all 23 of them, the people of Yemen have stepped up to the plate and done what they consider their national and indeed religious duty, to do everything within their power to come to the aid of the slaughtered, the besieged, the crucified Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And my goodness, what power they turned out to have. Only in the last 48 hours, they landed a ballistic missile called Palestine right in the middle of the Negev desert, on top of the Israeli Air Force's best and finest planes, men and women. They were on the tarmac. I don't know if you saw the picture. They were assembled in the parade ground for a fly-past or a flag-waving, flag-raising ceremony. And they all had to hit the deck, all 500 of them, lying prostrate on the ground, because this missile had come all the way from Yemen. It's a small answer, but it's a much bigger answer than anybody else in the Arab world has been able to deliver. The breach of the ceasefire agreement by Netanyahu is painfully easy to see the rationale for, but none, and I mean none, not one single one of the snake scream media has seen fit to enlighten their viewers or their readers about it. If Netanyahu had not broken the ceasefire, if Netanyahu had not launched a blistering air attack killing 460 people in one single night, 300 of them in one single hour, almost all of them women and children, all over again, Nightmare on Elm Street, back again and again and again. If Netanyahu had not done that on that particular day, he would have had to appear the next day in a court in Tel Aviv to give evidence about his own corruption in his own trial. But of course, the court hearing had to be postponed because, hey, Israel was at war in Gaza again. If you can't see what's going on here, you clearly are blind, willfully blind, the worst kind of blindness. But the slaughter from the air has, and by the way, also from warships off the coast of Gaza, has now been joined by what the Israeli mouthpiece in Britain, LBC, helpfully described as a pinpoint ground invasion. Pinpoint. With pins. They're going in with pins. And they've got a clear point. Although when we see the casualties from it, they are almost certainly to be the same melancholy, dismal parade of women and children torn to pieces. Some of the video, some of the pictures this week has been extremely painful to watch, probably because, well, we had hoped and prayed that we would not have to look at these things again. Fathers holding their little children, stone cold dead. Fathers fondling the pigtails of their little daughters just prior to laying them in the cold earth. The savagery of the barbarians in Israeli uniforms is breathtaking, not just because of the horror that it delivers, but the absolute insouciance with which the world's Western leaders, forever in a paroxysm about Russia and Ukraine, have completely ignored. Not one of them has said one word about the resumption of the slaughter in blatant defiance of the ceasefire agreement, which was solemn and binding, we were told. There's no question about who is to blame. The Palestinians have done nothing but comply in toto with their obligations under the ceasefire agreement, which you will recall had the imprimatur, albeit by auto pen, of President Biden of the United States of America. Although it was brokered, we were told, by the peace president, Donald Trump. Donald Trump gave the green light for the slaughter in Gaza the night before last. Of that there is no doubt. The Israelis said it, and the United States press officer also said it. She endorsed the statement that came out from Tel Aviv that they had been consulted in advance of this mass murder. This mass murder is of a level of the very worst of days over the last year and a half of nightly mass murder. It was not followed by mass murder last night, but it has been followed today by this pinpoint ground invasion, together, of course, with bombardments. The bombardment never stops. I've used the word barbaric and barbarian for two reasons. One, because it is, and second, because the, how shall I put it, academically challenged President of the United States of America, a man who has probably only read one book in his entire life, a man whose only book is The Art of the Deal, has taken routinely to describing the people of Yemen as barbarians. He also called them pirates, though, as my good friend Garland Nixon, who helpfully stood in for me on Wednesday evening, put it, the American people think they're on an ocean liner, but in fact they're on board a pirate ship. The pirates are you, President Trump. The barbarian is you. That you should imagine that the part of the world that invented mathematics, the part of the world that invented the number zero, the part of the world that invented algebra and geometry, the part of the world that had the world's greatest library when we were living in the woods with our faces painted blue, and your country didn't even exist for 2,000 years afterwards, that you should call them barbarians? when it is you who is slaughtering their children in their home when they have never done anything to you. In fact, the United States, throughout the Biden presidency, was bombing Yemen with great regularity. The United States has never done killing Yemenis, but they have still never done anything to you. Their threat was to Israeli shipping, a kind of modern-day armed picket line. Any vehicles, vessels going to or from the country that is committing genocide in Gaza will be intercepted by us, captured if possible, sunk if not. Well, actually, that was the only lawful act that is possible to do in the face of what the ICJ has called genocide. The highest court in the world requires all states to do what Yemen has done. It legally requires every state in the world to do everything that it can to interdict acts of genocide. So actually, the Yemenis are not the brigands, the pirates, least of all the barbarians. They're the only ones in this entire picture who are behaving lawfully, legally. And in any case, they were doing it only to Israel. I know you wanted Canada as your 51st state, or maybe that was Greenland. Is Israel your 51st state, President Trump? Because if not, you told us that you were an America first man. You told us you were going to make America great again. MAGA, you called it. Not MIGA, make Israel great again. And if I seem to be preoccupied by Israel on this day that the JFK files have been released, maybe it's because I'm looking, and I've now read 1,000 pages, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack, but I suspect you've already removed the needle from the haystack. And that needle is called Israel. The only thing that has been redacted of note in the entire 80,000 pages is any and all reference to the Israeli Secret Service, Mossad. Now, the reason I know that is because you couldn't even get that right. Because whilst it's redacted throughout within brackets, it isn't redacted at all in several of the early pages. Your redactors missed it. So we now know what the brackets mean. We know what the brackets of that length mean, and they mean the Israeli Secret Service. I cannot say that I myself have yet found or could reasonably conclude that Israel was involved in the nightmare on Elm Street in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. But I've seen some pretty powerful clues. A man called James Angleton, buried with full military honors in Israel, who was the head of counterintelligence operations for decades in the CIA, ironically his middle name was Jesus, was an Israeli agent. That much is stated not even in brackets. It's stated in your own documents that Angleton was an Israeli agent. And we know that he was deeply involved in the run-up to the assassination of President Kennedy, in the building of a casus belli against President Kennedy, particularly Kennedy's determination to thwart Israeli efforts to acquire nuclear weapons entirely illegally, which they continued to hold in profusion, uninspected, not subject to any treaty, not subject to any inspection by the IAEA or the Non-Proliferation Treaty experts. They got that bomb illegally, and they got it thanks to people like James Angleton. And when Kennedy didn't like it and hauled Ben-Gurion to answer for the illegal act of building secretly a nuclear weapon, Angleton and his Israeli controllers determined that President Kennedy had to go one way or another. Sure, they had fertile ground. They did, it seems, have at large an assassin called Lee Harvey Oswald. He was called an assassin in writing by Moscow prior to the assassination of President Kennedy. Yes, that's right. The Soviet Union warned America that Lee Harvey Oswald had purchased a weapon and was going to kill President Kennedy. If only they'd listened to the Soviet Union, which was warning them about the upcoming murder of the best president they ever had. We do know that Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated in the parking garage of Dallas Police Station by a man called Jack Rubenstein, although, for reasons best known to themselves, history records him as Jack Ruby. But he was never Jack Ruby. He was always Jack Rubenstein, a strip club owner that we now know from the release of the files today met with Lee Harvey Oswald only 2 weeks before the crime was committed. It was murder most foul, as Bob Dylan says. It was the beginning of the end of America, as I say. But it's not the only murder most foul that we've been watching and reading about this very week. We've got some cracking guests for you this evening, so you better stay tuned. This is the mother of all talk shows.